Ladies and gentlemen, go for a wild, wild ride with the honey badgers. But beware, the sweetest kittens have the sharpest claws. For your own safety, strap yourself in and hold on to something as we enter the Pussycat Cast. Taboo topics, uncomfortable truths, marginalized men. The Pussycats aren't afraid of heavy lifting. This evening's verbal Valkyries are the polecat punster, now Pussycat punter, Hannah, the not-so-cuddly Bunny Blackwell, and the pickle in this clam bake is myself, Brian, your humble narrator and supreme doge in charge. Take it away, Bunny.
I don't think I can top that, and I'm glad I was muted because I would have laughed. You are exactly correct. And chat, please do let us know how the volume levels are. Okay, so welcome to the inaugural episode of the Pussycat Cast. And today we're talking about everybody's favorite subject, which is, of course, rape, because we live in a rape culture, so it's everywhere, right? Yes and no, which we're going to get into in this stream. And I have to say, this stream is not going to be happy, fuzzy kittens and rainbows. It's not going to be happy, fuzzy, cuddly kittens and rainbows. It's going to be tackling a serious topic. So hopefully, if we do inject levity into it, it will be construed as the dark humor it is meant to be. So come with me on a journey through rape culture. When I say the word rape, where does your mind go? A helpless girl gagged and bent over a table? That scene from Rob Roy? The Watchmen movie? Maybe even Deliverance. But most people picture a male aggressor. Not good, not bad. It is what it is. It's what many see. It's what laws, the media, and sentencing reflect, after all. But the idea that male rape victims are currently an arguable minority, and I say arguable minority only because gathering accurate data when there is a bias in how sexual assault and rape conviction is evaluated, specifically with respect to penetration versus envelopment, hard numbers become impossible. And it needs to be questioned. And to be fair, some are questioning it, and not even recently. When I was doing my digging for this stream, I found an excellent thesis published in 1998. It's currently part of the National Library of Canada collection, by the way, by Paula Melanson. It's not going to be put up here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Paula Melanson, you can Google that shit, of course. But it's entitled Belief in Male Rape Myths, a test of two competing theories at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. That's Canada. If you have a moment to check it out, it's not an easy read, but it's goddamn eye-opening. So I'm going to read a short bit from it before we get into the rest of it. But the idea of male rape in culture has been quietly questioned, but it needs to be more loudly questioned. So reading from Melanson's thesis. So, quote, although sexual assault is still predominantly a crime committed against women, there are a substantial number of male victims of sexual assault. Furthermore, a review of the literature on male rape suggests that there are many false and prejudicial beliefs about the sexual assault of men, beliefs that can be called rape myths. These myths include such things as the belief that male rape only occurs in prisons, that men who have been raped have lost their manhood, and the belief that if a man is raped, he must be homosexual. The most pervasive male rape myth appears to be the belief that the rape of adult men simply can't happen. Give us a background for today, because that's what we're discussing. And those reasons in the very beginning of this thesis are why it needs to be discussed. Go.
I'm good.
Woo!
I can't promise that I'm going to be able to stay, but I managed to get to the point where I don't feel like I'm going to fall over, or start hurling. Yeah, I don't know. My kid and I just both got hit with like waves of nausea and stomach pain and lightheadedness. And thank God my man is okay, because we'll need somebody to look after us. Dab our heated brows with damp cloths, lightly scented with lavender, that kind of thing. We'll need a little TLC maybe, but yeah, I think the waves of it have gone, and but yeah, I there you go. I'm not planning on eating anything anytime soon. Let me just tell you that. So.
Just caught Karen's flu.
Oh no.
Oh, it's transmissible over the internet. Oh no.
Well, if we're gonna read stuff like that, it is.
Yeah, well, it's honestly, I'm surprised she actually got 10 years.
That was my comment. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was an error. I was muted for some reason, so I'm gonna read it over again. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna start the story over. It's just the summarization. Teacher sexually assaults student. Middle school teacher Alexandria Vera is accused of having a sexual relationship with a 13-year-old student. The 24-year-old middle school instructor told officials she met the boy during a summer school session. Vera claims that she and the 13-year-old victim love each other and that they have been sleeping with each other for 9 months, having sex almost daily. She also claimed the boy's family was supportive and excited. Once Child Protective Services got involved with her relationship with the teen, Vera says that she aborted the baby. In November of 2016, she pled guilty to aggravated sexual assault of a child. Not rape, sexual assault. This past Friday, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 5 years. The boy, now 14, will remain in foster care through August of this year. His parents have been ordered to undergo therapy. Now, I apologize.
Well, his parents were supportive of the relationship. They really need some fucking therapy.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this isn't necessarily like, because when I was in junior high, I had a friend who had a friend. This girl was not a friend of mine, but I knew her through my good friend, who was 13 and had a 22-year-old boyfriend, and her parents seemed to be perfectly fine with that, and perfectly fine with this guy picking her up from school, from the junior high school, in his car, because he was an adult and she was 13. I mean, it was in grade 8. So it was just like, personally, I think all families who think that that's okay should probably clean out their fucking headgear. But essentially, like, I'm shocked that this woman was actually punished. Like, one of the things that I commented on a recent video, right, in regard to like the victim blaming that feminists are usually outraged about, what were you wearing? What did you do to contribute to, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, if someone gets bitten by a snake, we assume that's a bad outcome. We acknowledge something bad has happened to that person. That doesn't stop us from asking, did you step on the snake? Were you not?
Karen?
Was there something you did that might have contributed to a set of circumstances in which a snake bit you and almost killed you? What happens more often with men and boys who are victimized by women is that people act like getting bitten by the snake is a favor on the part of the snake, or that it's just a normal part of life, no biggie, certainly no harm done. The victim blaming feminists talk about regarding women is a step up from the treatment of men victimized by women. In order to victim blame, you must first acknowledge that someone has been victimized. Male victims don't get victim blamed because they're not even acknowledged as victims. You don't blame someone for getting lucky. You high-five them or express good-natured envy. You lucky bastard, I wish I had that problem. Now, which of these responses is more of a normalization of rape?
Where were those teachers when I was in school? Yuck, yuck. Yeah.
Yuck, 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 yeah.
You know what I want to know? I want to know, where are the multitudes of protesters who were upset that it wasn't classified as rape, that Brock Turner didn't stop after his impromptu date passed out? Where are all those protesters? With this being only, this is actually sex that resulted in the conception of a child. So it's definitely penis and vagina sex, and it's not classified as rape. Where are those protesters now? Where are they?
Well, at
I
least
haven't heard from a single one of them.
At least the headline of the article described it as a sexual assault.
Yeah, it is. I'm glad that they're acknowledging it. I'm glad that she got time. I'm glad that there is some justice for this young man. But what the hell? Where's the outrage over not labeling rape a rape when it's clearly non-consensual, because he can't consent? It's still rape of someone who does not have the capacity to consent. If they're going to be upset that it's not labeled rape when a guy doesn't stop sticking his fingers in the vagina of a woman that was participating until she passed out,
yeah,
then they need to at least acknowledge that it's rape when a woman envelops the penis of somebody who, because of his age, does not have the capacity to consent. If the sexes were reversed, and it was a girl and a man, and it was not labeled rape, there would be riots.
Oh, what gets me, right, is that when you actually look at the FBI definition, and feminists will say, oh, well, we did men such a big favor because men are now included in the definition. Well, no, not necessarily. That actually is still an ambiguous question. That is still a question that has not been answered by the FBI, that made to penetrate, that men
right.
who are raped in that way by women are included in that definition. It's not in the handbook of examples for police agencies who are going to be reporting. It's nobody who answers the phones or answers emails at the FBI is clear on whether it's included in the definition. If you squint hard enough at the wording of the definition, you can actually say, okay, if we label the perpetrator and the victim person A and person B, and we switch around person A and person B, yeah, okay, it could be included given the wording, but I doubt it was intentional. I think the only reason why men were included is because men also have mouths and anuses, right? And therefore they could not actively be excluded from the definition if they wanted to include anal rape and oral rape of women. They had to include anal rape and oral rape of men. And they had to include those men because they wanted to remove the element of force, right? They wanted to remove the forcibly and against her will element from the definition. They wanted to remove the element of force to make it so that if a woman just stops participating and stops communicating and lies there stiff as a board, and the man takes 5 minutes to notice that she's not into it, he's guilty
Or
of rape.
1 second even is enough. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how many feminists see that in the definition. If local law enforcement, local prosecutors, local judges, if the court personnel, if they're not seeing it in it and it's not being treated as such,
Well,
it
but
doesn't matter if every feminist that reads it, it doesn't matter if every MRA that reads it sees it in the definition. It matters how it is
applied.
how it's applied. And what you mentioned about the handbooks, that guides how it's applied. That, and there's usually comments, when a law is passed, there's usually comments that also guide it. So if there was not anything to lead these people to look at this as applicable to female perpetrators who forcibly envelop male victims.
Yeah, there was nothing. There was nothing from the FBI. It was all about, now male victims who have been forcibly penetrated will be acknowledged as victims of rape.
Yeah,
right?
So it was strictly to take the element of force, the element of intent out of the crime, and to expand the scope of male perpetrators
Yeah.
that could be considered rapists
And-
as
and
opposed to just sexual assailants.
so frustrating about this is if you actually put it in the context of say, a Catholic priest, right, and a boy of 8 years old, right, and that Catholic priest forces fellatio on that boy, forcibly fellates a boy, right, that doesn't count as rape. Because it's the priest who's being penetrated. It's the perpetrator who's being penetrated, right? This is the Mary Koss definition, right? It's based on penetration of the victim, right? Not penetration of the perpetrator, and therefore an 8-year-old boy who is given fellatio by an adult man would not be considered a victim of rape.
Yeah. You guys still there? Hello?
Yeah, still here.
Okay. It was
Maybe I
Lois.
just stopped everybody in their tracks right there.
No, I'm waiting my turn patiently.
And I've pretty much said what I'm going to say on this, unless something comes up to bounce off of. I'm glad that there's been some improvement as far as justice is concerned, and I'm calling out the hypocrisy among feminists and social justice warriors who are not exercising the same outrage over the lack of proper labeling for this that they did over a situation where 2 drunk people were having sex and one of them passed out and the other one didn't stop in time.
Bunny, did you want to take your opportunity? Seize it
Seize.
now while there is silence.
Seize the day.
Carpe moment, yes. So, well, I didn't want to interrupt, though. I never want to interrupt you guys when you're on a rule. But to get back to the sentencing, 10 years, I'm quite happy about that. Not going to lie. But when I was looking into this, I looked at adults. So for me, it was adult to adult. I didn't even look at kids. I didn't even look at minors and that stuff there. But what I found is that the sentencing gaps are staggering. And I only laugh because it's so bad. It's really bad. So, for example, we've got 2005 Norway. Yeah, she was convicted. She got 9 months. 2015 Seattle. Yeah, she was convicted. She got 9 months. And then you switch over to, there's a guy in France who recently continued fucking a girl with consent, but she was insistent on a condom, and he took the condom off, and he got 1 year suspended, which isn't a harsh sentence, but he got 1 year suspended for it was a technicality of consent, right? So this is where we're going. Although he was a douche for taking the condom off, just putting that out there. We've got a Duggar family tutor convicted, 3 years. Augusta County, 20 years, 13 suspended, so he only has to serve 7, but that's still 7 years. Sacramento, 8 years, and these are adults. So even though more women are being convicted, and I actually went country by country to find out exactly what the laws were, and it took for freaking ever, but and some countries, women are never going to be convicted of this, but at least here they are, but it's slow, and their sentencing is really low. And there are a lot of reasons for that, some of which were covered in the intro and some of which have been covered by Karen and Hannah. But there's this prevailing attitude that men simply can't be raped. And if something does happen, it has to be downgraded. And even if the woman is convicted, they're not going to suffer the same sentence. So I'm glad we're talking about this. That's all I wanted to say.
I wanted to add one thing from Canada, right? Because there was a man recently in Nova Scotia who his relationship with his girlfriend was on the rocks, and he figured that in order to essentially rescue the relationship, a pregnancy and a baby would probably do the trick. How many women think that about relationships that either are breaking down or not going where they want them to go when they want them to go there? So he decided to poke holes in the condoms that they were using, and she got pregnant, ended up having an abortion, and broke up with him anyway. And then when he found out through social media and mutual friends that she was dating again, he was quite the gentleman and phoned her and advised her not to use the condoms in the nightstand because they had been tampered with. And this is the only reason why he was actually caught, is because he was kind enough to let her know don't use those condoms because I fucked with them. Okay. And he was convicted of aggravated sexual assault. It went to the appeal court. The appeal court and the Supreme Court ended up upholding the decision that this was aggravated sexual assault. The sexual assault portion of the decision had everything to do with informed consent, right? It was,
Yes.
it was just she did not consent to unprotected sex, right? Therefore, what he did was sexual assault. Even if she hadn't gotten pregnant, it would have still counted as sexual assault. But the aggravated part was because of the physical injury of the pregnancy and the subsequent abortion, right? So he was convicted of aggravated sexual assault. But in the decision, the judge essentially made some fucking stupid-ass special pleading argument that this decision does not apply to women who lie about birth control in order to get pregnant against their partner's wishes. So consent under Canadian law means nothing if you're a man. There is no concept of informed consent if you're a man, right?
You know,
if she
guys need to start testing that.
If she says, I'm on the pill, and you find out she was lying, right? You have no legal recourse.
Guys need to start testing that.
They do.
You know, they need to get at somewhere along the line. If you're gonna sleep with a woman and she's saying she's on the pill, personally, if you're not in a monogamous relationship with somebody that you know is for a fact is disease free, you should use a condom anyway, because birth control pills don't stop anything but pregnancy. But if you're going with that and you're trusting birth control pills, get it on record. And then if she hits you with a child support order later on, you pull that out and file a complaint. You know, it needs to happen. It needs to happen repeatedly.
Well,
because women are using that repeatedly.
And
it wouldn't stand up
tested
now, though.
over and over again. One judge might have said that, but it is possible for something like that to be changed by another judge.
The problem with that is that it's very easy to observe when a condom is not being used, right? It is very,
Yes.
or
But that makes it all the more. That makes it all the more dastardly when a woman lies about the pill. That's why
it makes it harder to prove, right? Because how can you tell? Can you tell that I didn't take my birth control pills?
if you get pregnant, yeah.
No,
You screwed up. You didn't use your pills correctly if you get pregnant.
There's also, I was just going to say, there's also the effectiveness issue, because it can vary depending on how many hours it takes between when you take them. I mean, peak effectiveness, it has to be same time every day. And
not using it correctly, that's the same as poking a hole in the condom. If you're going to take responsibility for something like that, it's on you to know how to use it correctly and do it.
I agree with you, Hannah, but I can see one being malicious and one being negligent. And the things are viewed differently.
Yeah, but if a woman can accuse a guy of being a rapist for not knowing that she passed out, which is negligence, especially if he's also drunk as a skunk. So obviously, then if we're going to apply the standard both ways, then a guy should be able to do the same thing. And my reason for doing this isn't because I want a bunch of women convicted of rape for screwing up with their birth control pills. It's that I want the ridiculousness of this to come through. Yes, it is a douchebag move. No matter whether you are male or female, it is a douchebag move to deliberately or negligently let your partner down in terms of birth control. But it's not rape.
No.
I would say essentially that I agree with your argument. I agree with the fact that we need to uphold the same standards between men and women, but I'm realistic in terms of what I think the courts are going to actually be willing to do. And I don't think that the courts are going to be willing to prosecute huge numbers of women who lie about birth control to trap their partners into pregnancy and having a baby. I don't think that that's going to happen. I mean, look at.
No, I don't think it matters if the courts are willing or not. I think the effect of a lot of men making the complaint would be what was needed. You know, that would get the message across. If it's what's good for the gander is good for the goose, then what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
I would hope, but I don't see it being seen in the same way. And I just
I
don't
think it would make the news, and I think it would get a discussion started. And that's what's really necessary.
the discussion is what's necessary, but I don't think we're ever going to see, I don't think society is ever going to see it in the same light.
Well, I don't think society is ever going to take the male position to the female position. But I think society could see it as being just as ridiculous for a woman to say she was raped because a guy didn't stop when the condom broke or didn't use a condom or poked holes in the condom as it is for a guy to say that he was raped and the woman committed rape because he lied about it being on the pill, or she didn't follow the instructions for taking the pill, didn't pay attention, and was negligent in using it.
Well, what's frustrating to me about the entire argument is that if I were to go by sort of common current feminist definitions of consent and particularly affirmative consent, my very first sexual experience was technically rape because the guy felt me up without asking first. I wasn't comfortable with that. I asked him to stop. He stopped. And then a week later, we were making out again. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So essentially, like, his finger was the first, up to the first knuckle inside my body, and without asking first. And I didn't want it to be there at that moment. And because of that, he's actually technically a rapist, and I'm technically a rape victim. And it doesn't matter that I said, no, I'm not ready. And he backed off like right away and went, oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. None of that matters, right? So you got these young kids clumsily learning about themselves, their boundaries, their bodies, all of that stuff. They don't know these things ahead of time. They don't know what they're going to be comfortable with, what's going to feel good, versus, what they think is going to feel good going in, and then maybe they change their minds. And so you have this whole system where if a man doesn't have permission every freaking step of the way, actual, active, ongoing permission, verbal permission every step of the way, and if he doesn't have it fucking recorded on a database somewhere, right? He's vulnerable to a claim that he crossed a line that is criminal.
Okay.
And that's the thing that needs to end. I mean, it needs to go back to a common sense point where we are recognizing that rape is an intentional crime and that it isn't an accident, and maintaining the crime's definition to rely on intent. And I think the only way to do that is to start applying that standard equally to women. Whatever standard men face, women have to face it too. If we can't do that, and if the courts stop it or the police stop it or whatever, it needs to make the news that it's being brought up and it's being ignored. And that discussion needs to be initiated by the fact that men are not getting the same recourse for the same accusations made for the same reasons. And then we will hit the discussion of when is this a reasonable accusation and when are we bullshitting?
Well, mens rea needs to matter. Absolutely, intent needs to matter. And essentially, if we want to turn rape into a strict liability offense, okay, so there was recently a case of a Canadian woman who was arrested in the Bahamas or Barbados after having sex with a 15-year-old boy on a cruise. Now, he was in a bar and casino. He was 6'2" and had a beard, a full beard. And so and he told her he was 18. And she had no reason, this 23-year-old woman had no reason to believe that he was not at least 18 years old. They had sex in the bathroom. His mother saw them coming out of the bathroom together, right? And she filed the complaint. He begged her not to. He was just, like, no, I made this happen, right? You want rape to be a strict liability offense? This woman is now facing trial in a foreign country because apparently in the country that this happened, rape is seen as a strict liability offense. Intent does not matter. It doesn't matter if you watch them get carded by the bartender and the bouncer. It doesn't matter if they told what they told you. It doesn't matter if they showed you ID. It doesn't matter if fucking former President Obama introduced them to you as, this is my 23-year-old cousin in med school. Doesn't fucking matter. If it turns out they were 14 years old or 15 years old, if they were underage and you had sex with them, doesn't matter what your belief was, doesn't matter what your intent was, right? You are on the hook for that. Do we really want rape to be a strict liability offense? Do we want mens rea? Do we want intent to not matter at all?
Well, with that said, I think we should move on to, this is related anyway, so we can continue this conversation, but I want to get Sean on to tell us his story. Well, first off, Sean, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on and tell us this. This is an extremely sensitive subject. And if you feel, like ready, you can just tell us about your experience, tell us your story. And I think we can use this as a launch pad to further the conversation. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
All right, go for it.
Well, in my 20s, I hooked up with a woman that pretty much beat, emotionally abused, and raped me for about a year to year and 3 months. And when I finally went to the police and got all my evidence and ducks in a row as they did their investigation, took me to the I went to their specialist, and yes, he confirmed that yes, I had been raped, that there was all the classic markings of everything. They arrested her. She spent 48 hours in jail, and I was told by the DA that there was no way that they were gonna convict a woman of raping a man.
When you say the classic marks, is it possible to be a little bit more specific?
Genital bruising, the tissue in my penis had been sprained. There was bruising on my body from where I had been beaten. But it was the genital bruising that was the hallmark signs of male rape.
Yep.
How?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sean. I'm so sorry, Sean.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things to where, it happened to me. It has kind of made me a stronger and wiser person. And, like I said, she got a whole whopping 48 hours in jail, but.
Well, that was when she was being held, awaiting whether they were going to actually move forward with the charges, I'm guessing, right? She was under arrest, but not that there had not yet been a decision to prosecute at that point. She was awaiting bail or awaiting a hearing, an arraignment, whatever. Yeah. And then they decided not to do that.
Yeah, the DA he said he wasn't going to go ahead with charges because there was no way they could get a conviction on a woman raping a man.
Yeah, they can't sell it. They can't sell it to a jury. They can't necessarily sell it to a judge. They would have a better chance selling it to a judge than to a jury, I'm sure, because judges are required to be bound by the points of the law, even if instinctively they don't necessarily think that it's a big deal. They have to abide by the law as it's written, but juries are notorious for making emotional decisions, and if they don't care, they're not going to convict. So, yeah. Bunny, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say, I'm in forensics, right? And so I think this is relevant. We are taught in forensics to do sexual assault evaluation and what to look for and what the benchmarks are. And it is strongly listen and believe. It's strongly, you take the information down, you be as neutral as you can, you always support the person in what they feel happened. But what ends up happening after the fact is all of that drops off one way. And it does become more biased toward women and more biased against men. This was something that I had a huge problem with in my classes, actually, because, and I had a little freak out on Twitter about it, because I was like, what the fuck am I actually sitting through? Because there is lip service given to, oh, and men can be victims too, just so you know. But all the movies for you to watch as part of your homework are female victims, FYI. So it's this double talk, right? Oh yeah, men are totally victims, but they're really not. It's really all women, because here's all of the studies we're going to do. All of the studies we had to do, all the videos we were supposed to watch were female victims, male perpetrators. And when I pointed that out to the administration, they looked at me like I'd grown another head. Well, what are you talking about? It is mostly women. And I'm like, except it's not. Because except
Even
it's not.
Mostly women, you would still expect to see one example.
Not one, Karen. Not
depth.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really bothered me. And I actually went home. I was so I had a hornet's nest shoved up my arse about it too. Like I said, I actually went and talked to my professor privately. Well, semi-privately. He wouldn't meet with me alone due to fear of rape allegations, but that's another story. But when I actually looked up like the CDC stats and shit like that, it is so close. I mean, even in terms of, okay. 2010, the infamous National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, right? We've got 1.267 million men made to penetrate, very similar to the amount of women who reported being raped in the same time period. Another, National Crime Victimization Survey. Nearly half of the men who reported some form of sexual victimization were victimized by women. And yet, even in forensics, right? I'm studying to actually do this, testify on the stand some fucking day, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to take out my piercings. But anyway, it is still so biased. We don't have we're not made to do any fucking study on male victims of sexual violence, but we're given all this stuff where women are the victims. And I could not believe it. My beloved forensics was starting, well, I can't even say starting, but my beloved forensics had turned on me. So Sean, when you tell me your story, it breaks my fucking heart. But I am right there with you in that I absolutely believe what you're saying. Because I've seen it in training for the other fucking side. And it is shocking.
It's all policy. It's all policy documents, and it's all best practices, and it's, like the letter of the law can be perfectly gender neutral. One person forces or has sex with another person without their consent. Totally in Canada, sexual assault is like rape is, there is no in Canada. There are only degrees of sexual assault. And so men under the letter of the law can equally be victims. The definition of consent applies to men just as it applies to women. But when it comes to policies, best practices, the decisions of Crown attorneys, right, our DAs, all of those things, and the predicted decisions of judges and juries, right, all of those things go out the window, and it's all extremely biased. And then you go into like how these people are trained, the training materials that they're provided. Judges, Crown attorneys, defense attorneys, guardians ad litem, medical practitioners, all of these people have been presented with that same sort of one-sided roster of, examples that you have had experience with, Bunny. Like,
And that's why I brought it up. You're not talking out of your ass here. I have sat through it. You are exactly 100% correct when you say these things.
Yeah, no, and that's the really egregious part, is because, legislation has to be debated in Parliament in Canada. Legislation has to be voted on by representatives elected by the people, by the electorate, right? And it has to pass the lower house and then the upper house, right? And then it has to be signed into law, right? It has to be scrutinized by the sober second thought of the Senate in Canada. It has to pass 2 houses and then be signed by a governor or by the president in the United States, right? In order to, so it has to be debated. The people have to be informed of these laws, these proposed laws, these bills, right? Whereas with policy documents and best practices and handbooks and training materials, all of those are decided on by ad hoc committees of appointed bureaucrats that are hand selected by other bureaucrats. None of them are elected, and they have as much or more power than the legislation itself.
I want to point a couple of things out. One of them's regarding that 2010 report, and the other one is I have a question. But regarding the 2010 report, the researchers who did the research for that report don't even know why they used a definition that excluded female perpetration against male victims. Because I asked them. I did a FOIA request, and they finagled to get out of giving me the information that I asked for. They did give me the information they had to give me. I posted a blog post about that. The title of it, something like "Sorry for the Cliffhanger."
Didn't you ask them to provide you with previous year numbers for Made to Penetrate? Right?
Yeah, just the 12-month numbers, because those were the ones that would give us a more accurate representation. Yeah. And the title of the blog post I wrote was FOIA Update, Sorry for the Cliffhanger, because it took them a year to get me, just about a year to get me that information. And
what was that information?
They didn't give me the full information. They gave me what they wanted to give me, and they made me participate in a phone call to get it, in which they told me why I couldn't use it. And in that phone call, I asked why they used that definition. And the woman who was one of the researchers that answered stumbled and stumbled. And if you look up the video, it's Men's Rights versus Feminist Rape Culture Explained Using Puzzle Pieces. Yeah. Allison goes through and explains in very stark and very clear terms why it's stupid to define rape to exclude male victims of female perpetrators and female perpetration in general. And at the end of the video, you can hear that part of that phone call.
Yeah, but I want to know, like, because they provided previous year numbers on the number of men who were victimized by this particular act, but they only provided lifetime numbers on the sex of the perpetrator.
Right. They didn't give, and the information that they didn't give was the information I asked for. They made a point to prevent that information from getting through. Like, if you look at the blog post, you'll see what they did give me, because there's PDF. Yeah, they have it. They're just not sharing it. And then the other thing they did was they hid the research at a university in Michigan. And it is, in order to get that research, you have to have the right qualifications, and the right qualifications can include your area of study. So they've basically locked it away so that only social justice oriented researchers who are part of interdisciplinary studies type academia can access it. They hid it because they have something to hide.
Freaking, like, that's obscene, because like when you look at how the CDC presented those results, right? They had these equal numbers of men and women forced having been subjected to non-consensual sexual intercourse by identical definitions, right? Just essentially switch around who is the penetrator and who is the penetratee, right? The definitions were the same. They had equal numbers of victims, previous 12 months, right? And what they did in their press materials, what they did in their summary report was go out of their way to highlight a specific piece of a specific data point, which was 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be victims of rape in their lifetimes. Now, this maximizes the number of female victims, it minimizes the number of male victims, and it completely erases all female perpetrators, because even when it comes to rape over lifetimes of men, right? Rape by their definition, which is penetration of the victim, right? Even when it comes to that, there is not a statistically significant number of female perpetrators. So essentially, it's almost like they're saying, we're okay with recognizing men as victims as long as they're being victimized by other men, right? But it's like the thing that they really want to hide is female perpetration. And all of that tells me that they're desperate to define and describe sexual violence as something that is inherently male. It is a masculine norm. It is part of masculinity. And so therefore, the extremely rare female who engages in serious sexual violence, right, is an outlier. She's an exception. Perhaps she's even one of these women who's been so damaged by the patriarchy and has internalized misogyny that, you know, she would be, you know, blah, 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 right? But it's certainly not something that happens in, you know, to any degree, with any kind of, it's not commonplace. It's not remotely up there in terms of prevalence, right? With male perpetration, that's what I think that they're actually trying to hide. It's not men as being capable of being victimized. It's women, women's capacity for perpetration. I think that's what they're inherently trying to hide.
Yes,
and that's why they
yes.
won't release those previous year numbers on the sex of the perpetrator for made.
And that's why they want made to penetrate to not be included in the definition of rape. Because you think about it, all right, a rapist that is going for sexual stimulations of the self, that if it's a woman, she's not going to penetrate. She's going to force penetration. And it's very difficult to get somebody to consider clitoral stimulation to be a form of penetration, because it doesn't stick out for the most part enough that people would think of it that way. And at the same time, you know, you have with men, they've got something that sticks out, so that makes it very easy for them, easy for these people to try to divide it by that in order to hide the fact that women do this. Women who rape are only going to penetrate their victims if they are doing it to inflict an experience on the victim, not to create an experience for themselves. So here you have a situation where they've broadened the definition of rape to encompass more and more men that they can call men and boys that they can call perpetrators for having an experience, even if they did not have intent to contravene the alleged victim's right to say no. And at the same time, you know, they only want to catch women if they are so violent and so cruel as to forego their own experience, because the important experience for them is watching the other person suffer whatever experience that they force on them.
Like the woman who was a featured speaker at the Women's March.
Right.
Yeah, Donna Hilton, who was convicted and sentenced to 20 years or something like that for
torturing and murdering. Not just torturing, but torturing over several days.
Yeah, 15 to 20 days. They said they weren't sure how long, and the one of the forms of torture was anally penetrating him with a iron rod, 3-foot iron rod. And you have those things. You have women,
and she's celebrated by feminists.
Yeah, she was a featured speaker at the Women's March. You have women in the Congo, women militants in the Congo who have inflicted extreme violence, sexual violence on men and women, penetrating them with screwdrivers and weapons and all kinds of things, and then routinely killing them at the end of it. if the men don't stop them from doing that.
Now
And-
that Sean is back, though, I want to ask the question I was going to ask in addition to the thing I was saying earlier, because
Yes.
that I think that'll get us back on track here. You said the prosecutor, Sean, can you are you back? Like
Yeah,
you can
I'm
hear us?
here.
Okay.
I'm here.
You said the prosecutor didn't want to prosecute for rape. Did he even bring up the possibility of charging her with anything at all, or did he just basically say no, she gets a pass because we can't convince a jury that this is rape?
No, she got a free pass.
Like a full-on didn't do
So
nothing pass.
He didn't get prosecuted for like physical assault or anything.
No, she didn't. No, they just nothing. She got the didn't do nothing pass.
Damn.
Oh my God.
I want to also ask a question of Sean too. When you were there, it was described to you the marker of men being raped by women. Was it specifically described as the penis spraining and the bruising and all that? Was that like how it was framed in terms of
Well, it
what
wasn't really
constitutes that?
No, I mean, this is what I had.
I see. So essentially, it was like.
This is what I had.
And I want to also, and I know this is going to get into some graphic detail, but I think it's important to know how, when you were raped, how did she go about doing that? If you don't mind me asking. Are you there? Sean, are we going to lose him? Is anybody there?
I'm here.
I'm here.
Okay, all right.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm still
that
here.
was stereo. Wow, yeah, no, I'm here.
Sean's having some internet problems, guys. We might lose him. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think it's because my question is too tough. So, but we may lose him. It's
Okay.
pretty quiet. Well,
While we're waiting for him to answer, I just want to point out that what we've got here is a case where police and prosecution had clear and easily detectable evidence of a violent act, and it in the course of the didn't do nothing pass, it doesn't matter whether they could get a rape conviction or not. They still had demonstrable evidence of a physical assault. And there is a history, although it's more challenging and the court's more lenient with them. There is a history in various locations of being able to prove that a woman committed assault. And even if they could not go through and get her on the full crime that she actually did, that prosecutor really should have at least tried to get her on something. He could have at least filed a charge of assault.
Yeah.
If you bruise someone and you sprain someone and that person is able to say, no, this was in a fight. We were not having a good time. This was a fight, and I was bruised and sprained by my opponent in this fight. You should be able to prosecute for that.
Having a great time, but I wasn't.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you should be able to prosecute for that at the very least.
And that's a good point, Hannah, because even in places that don't have formal rape laws that can apply to men as the victims, there will often be a small clause or another thing like forcible indecency. So at least something. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? But I'm shocked that there was no charge laid. That's, yeah. And to get back to what Karen was saying, we've gone an hour in and we haven't even touched on war and prison rape, and how egregious that is and how nobody gives a fuck about that. So this is a topic that could span hours and hours and hours. So
oh yeah,
but I hope Sean
have
comes
to-
back because I
yeah.
want to hear from him.
yeah, he's the guy I wanted to talk to. We could probably do a series of videos on rape when it comes to men in like other countries, in prisons, at the hands of women, and so on. But I'm really hoping that Sean can come back. I guess in the meantime, maybe one of you guys could, if you've like looked at cases of male victims of rape, if there's any sort of typical ways that this happens to guys. Like, do they get drugged, or does women do it by force? Do they threaten them in some way? You know, maybe
All of the above, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's documented cases online. The one that comes to mind first is, I think his name was James Landreth. I can't remember the last name very well. Karen probably knows. But he was in the military. And if I remember right, either he gave a woman a ride home or she gave him a ride home. And they ended up sharing a hotel room with 2 beds. And he woke up in the middle of the night. This was a pregnant woman. He woke up in the middle of the night with her on top of him going at it.
Yes.
And she said, "Don't try to stop me or you'll hurt the baby."
Yep.
And
I
so
remember reading that.
She held his protective nature of this baby. She held a baby hostage, her own baby, in order to rape this guy. So there's, like, women use all kinds of methods. Women and girls use all kinds of methods. Physical force can get used. There was an instance described on Reddit where a guy woke up to a girl at a party riding him, and she had put a Q-tip into his urethra because that was the only way to keep him erect. Then there was the celebrated speech of Amy Schumer, in which she talked about when she was in college, she got a phone call from a guy, 5-year senior, 5th-year senior, or whatever. She gets over to his place, and he turns out to be so blind, stinking drunk that he cannot appraise his own actions. He hasn't have the ability to look at her straight. He doesn't realize that he stinks. He can't walk straight, and is unaware of even what music he's playing on the radio, and passed out repeatedly during their sexual encounter. And the people that listened to that speech, the feminists that listened to that speech, celebrate it as a hallmark of self-esteem, the realization that, she was better than to put up with this
Okay.
quality of sex
Allison,
from this
mute.
guy that she raped.
Okay, Hannah, Sean is back. We
Yes.
gotta take advantage of this while we still have it. Sean,
I'm
did you
so
get my?
sorry. My
Sorry.
internet is acting like a complete spaz.
Did you get my last?
We'll work with
It's
it.
okay. Did you get my last question, Sean?
Which was?
My last question was, in your case, we were talking about the bruising and all that. I was asking you if you were okay with it. No. Hello? Are we losing him again? Sean? We're losing him again.
Oh no.
For fuck's sake. I think that question must be cancer to his internets. And yes,
I think it's
have a
cancer
lot.
to Hi Allison. I think it's cancer to everyone's internets. Oh,
God.
'cause this is a hard topic. So.
I have so much to say about this freaking topic. A couple people in chat are like, this topic is not good enough for an entire podcast. How could you do this? You usually, in fact, it was I think the Golden King who said something like, you usually have your finger on the pulse of men's rights issues. What are you doing? I'm like, Golden King.
Okay.
How many videos have we done on this issue?
Let's fucking flip. Okay, let's flip the script. Let's flip the script of relative costs, okay, and risks. Okay? Now, 200 years ago, it was the woman who bore all of the costs and risks if some sexual encounter that happened, she was taken advantage of. She was seduced, she was coerced, she was raped, whatever. She bore all of those costs and risks, right? Because the guy could walk away, and he had no parental rights, but he had the option.
Yeah, but Karen, okay.
No, he didn't. Not under seduction laws.
Okay, not under seduction laws. Seduction laws haven't been around forever.
No,
right?
but they were around 100 years ago, and
200
rape
years
laws
ago.
were around 100 years ago
Yeah,
too.
no, okay, but we're talking about our evolutionary responses to things, okay? We're talking
You
about
might
what
want to go
happened.
back 1,000 years.
We're talking about
I want to
1,000
go
years.
back further.
Shut up, Allison. We're talking about 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 years ago, right? The woman bore all the risks. The woman bore all the costs. That's why we feel so fucking insane about women now who have their fertility on total lockdown, who have every option to abort the baby, who do not have, their lives will not be ruined. They will not be unable to find a man to partner with them. They will not be denied a job. They will not be shamed in their communities. Nothing like that if they're raped, okay? None of those actual real world costs apply. None of those actual real world risks apply to women anymore. Women can mitigate them all through modern technology and modern social mores, okay? But men who are taken advantage of, they get the $200,000 baby mortgage. That's what they fucking get, even if they're 13 years old when it happens, okay? So let's actually take a look at the actual freaking laws, the actual structure of society right now, and ask who has more to lose. If
Don't forget about the student.
Coerces them or rapes them.
Karen, don't forget about the student who was raped, and then the girl accused him.
Yeah,
because she was embarrassed that people might find out what she did. And he was kicked out of school.
He was fucking expelled. And the reason why he was expelled is because we have this freaking ancient 200,000-year-old fucking mechanism in our heads saying what he did to her by not stopping her from raping him, that was like a horrible, heinous act that victimized her, right? Like, this is literally what we're dealing with. Our brains are fucking living 100,000 years ago, and everything's fucking changed. All of the institutional, legal, and social mechanisms have flipped on their heads, and now it is men and boys who are at risk. It is men and boys who bear the risks and costs of sex disproportionately, who cannot opt out of parenthood, who cannot opt out of even the idea that, a bad sexual encounter? Yeah, no, that's your fault, young man. That's entirely your fault, criminally.
There's a question that was asked in chat of what we want for the future, and I have an answer on that. The first thing is we need absolutely, and without question, we need to get back to defining this crime based on the concept of intent. It needs to be a crime wherein the perpetrator has deliberately contravened the victim's ability or right to refuse. And if the alleged perpetrator didn't do that, if the alleged perpetrator is accused of doing this by accident, then it's not rape. And it has to be that way. And then it has to be applied to both sexes equally. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. If you deliberately contravene somebody's ability or right to refuse sex with you, that's rape. And if you're mad because you had sex with somebody and your boyfriend or your girlfriend found out, or the two of you were drunk off your asses and you were having sex and you passed out and your partner didn't notice right away, or the condom broke, or any other reason that does not involve your alleged perpetrator deliberately making you do it, deliberately taking measures to prevent you from being able to refusing your refusal physically, then you were not raped.
All right.
I just want to say, I contravened Allison's right to talk just back then, and I'm sorry, Allison, go ahead.
Spank you later. All right. I'm gonna roar, and then Bunny can go, or we are gonna put Sean ahead.
No, Sean hasn't even answered the question yet, but go ahead.
All right, so I came on this stream because there's too much cancer in this fucking chat, and I need to call it out. All right, somebody was saying that it doesn't matter because men want to be touched by women no matter what. It doesn't fucking matter. It's all invited. It's all wanted. Every time a woman touches a man against his consent, it's not really against his consent because she's got the sexual desirability.
Oh yeah. Throw mama from the train. Puts her fucking hands on your junk. Yeah, you welcome that? You're okay with that? That's fucking perfectly fine.
And you're married and someone other than your wife does it, and you know you're going to get in trouble with your wife, and you say no because you don't want to get in trouble with your wife, or you're loyal to your wife. You say no out of loyalty to your wife. You're monogamous and you don't want, or you're gay. There's a million reasons why a guy would say no.
Well,
He doesn't trust a woman. He doesn't want to get her pregnant. He doesn't know if she has a disease or not. She's not his type. He's not in the mood. Sometimes guys actually aren't in the mood.
She's a fucking land whale. Trigglypuff fucking puts her hand on your junk. You're gonna.
All right, guys.
All right, Allison, go.
Yes, I got a rar. Okay, I'm gonna describe a scenario that actually makes me want to punch something. When guys say, "Oh, men can't be raped because they just want to be touched by women so much." My husband was attacked by a group of 16-year-old girls when he was in his early 20s. If he had not fought them, I think they probably were 16. They might have been underage. 16 is of age for Canada. And he managed to fight them off. And they were violent. They were scratching him, punching him, trying to corner him. And there was about 6 of them. And there is no man on this planet that is stronger than 6 16-year-old girls, unless you're like, I don't know, you win the strongman competition in like Northern Europe or some shit. Anyway, so he managed to fight these girls off. If anything had happened, he would be responsible for it legally. And that scared the shit out of him. Not to mention, he's not the kind of guy who wants to be touched by random people. And I'm gonna use an analogy here. Now, if you try, if you try to force feed a dog, 9 times out of 10, they'll accept that kind of manhandling because they're a dog. They're domesticated. They're used to being manhandled by humans. And they'll just accept the fact that I'm actually getting a delicious steak. This is wonderful. This is the most juicy, bloody steak. I'm just going to drool and enjoy it. Try to force feed a wolf and see what happens. There are some men who don't care how enticing the steak is. The instant you remove their autonomy, they are out for blood. Those men are wolves. And they exist. And I'm just putting that out there.
Not everybody is Hugo Schweitzer.
Yeah. And like I said, you try to force feed a wolf, you're lucky. No matter how delicious you think that steak is, you'll be lucky not to lose a hand in the process.
Okay, Sean dropped again, so.
All right. Serious question of the chat. I don't know. It's moving fast enough that maybe some people aren't seeing it. For these people who think there's no such thing as a guy's right to refuse. You take a girl who is actively underage, let's say 14 years old, because in most places, I don't know anywhere that 14 doesn't fall under the age of consent. 14-year-old contravenes his ability to refuse. And it doesn't matter how she does it. Maybe she uses a gun. Maybe she holds something hostage. Maybe she blackmails him. Maybe she drugs him. But she contravenes his refusal. A spoken, outright refusal. Is she guilty of rape? Or since she's underage, is he? If you don't believe that a man has a right to refuse, which one of them is guilty of rape?
There you go.
And Sean is back. Okay, Sean, let's hear it. Talk, please.
Okay.
Say something.
I'm sorry.
All right.
So I live in a group home, and they pay for like the bare minimum of internet. So.
Okay, that's all right. So let's see. Did you get my question? My last question.
I got about half your. I got half your question, and then
it dropped. Okay. I was asking if you don't mind doing it, for details on how this woman was, basically how you got raped by her. Like, what did she do to put you in that position? How did she do it? Also, maybe a little bit more information about why, if you know, why she would beat you and hit you and stuff. I'm trying to get into into the details of this, if you're willing.
No problem. No problem. Well, why she did it? I think she just thought it was fun.
Yeah.
I guess she just liked the control that she had over me.
What kind of stuff would she do? What, like, how did she beat you and
Oh,
stuff?
well, let's see. For Valentine's Day, I made a great dinner because I used to love to cook. Um, so I made a fantastic dinner, and the whole candlelight and roses and everything. And when she got home, she uh, hit me in the head with the frying pan that I had used to cook with. And that started a wonderful little escapade of hitting me until I had a pretty good concussion. And then
Did,
when I did regain some semblance of um, consciousness to where I realized what was going on, I was on the floor. She was on top of me, slapping me and riding me.
oh, what did you call the police the first time this happened? Did you or talk to someone or anything like that?
No, I took it for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's essentially, I think, like initially when something like that happens, you're so initially shocked, right? And then you try, because especially if you care about the person, right? You try to make excuses,
Oh,
right?
I had a list of excuses. Oh, I was always clumsy. When I had to go into the ER, it was just I was a clumsy person. And eventually the ER nurses saw through it and said, "Look, we know she's kicking the hell out of you. If you need us to call the police, we can." And I'm like, "No, no, I'm just clumsy."
Did she live with you?
Oh yeah, we were living together.
You know what's really striking about that is, and I'm grateful that the ER nurses actually offered to call the police for you. But in terms of suspected domestic violence against women, I think that in a lot of jurisdictions, people with a duty of care, so social workers, ER personnel, nurses, your doctor, your family doctor, if they suspect that a woman is a victim of domestic violence, they have an obligation. They aren't just going to offer to call the police for you. They actually call the police whether you want them to or not, whether you approve it or not. So I find, like, I'm glad that the nurses offered, but I just wish they had taken it the step further and actually just made the call, because they have every right to. If they suspect that a crime is occurring, they have an obligation to report a gunshot wound, even if you swear up and down that you had an accident cleaning your gun. They have an obligation to report that because there's a reasonable suspicion that a crime has taken place. So if they reasonably suspected that you were being beaten by your partner, they should have had that obligation to phone police on your behalf, whether you wanted them to or not.
All right, I want to dig a little bit deeper, Sean, if you don't mind.
Nope.
Uh, okay, so you gave me an example where she hit you with a frying pan, and then she would sexually assault. She would rape you afterwards. Is that accurate? That's what it sounds like you're describing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm assuming that that's not the only way that she did this. So what other
No.
ways in which, in what other ways would she initiate rape with you? Like, would she threaten you, with harm? Would she actually use harm? Would she, I don't know, like, what are some examples? I want to get an idea, and I think the people listening would also like to understand, like, an idea of how this woman would assault you, because it gives us a look into how bad this can get. So that's why I'm
Um,
asking.
well, there was emotional abuse to where she would threaten me with violence. She would use violence. She would threaten me and say that she would go to the cops and say I raped her.
Yeah.
Um,
Did she ever actually
she
call the
would.
cops on you for anything before? Did she ever make good on it in any way? Sean, are we losing you again? Sean.
Arg.
I think we have lost him again, so just save that question up for the next time he surfaces, I guess.
Okay. Well, I guess you guys can make, if you guys have anything to say about what he has told us so far, I'll give you the floor.
Well, personally, I can fill in from the stuff that I've read. There's multiple ways. Women often use drugs, for example, well, alcohol, like taking advantage of passed out drunk men, not just blacked out drunk men. Rohypnol, apparently. And then there was that famous and incredibly disturbing case that Canna referenced with the Q-tip in the man's urethra, which ended up shredding the inside of his penis and his bladder. Ooh, I think anybody can wince at that. So that he has up to this date apparently difficulty not just with sex but with urination. And I think the mechanics of that is that the U-tip allows enough rigidity that the natural response of the area, because when you touch men's genitals or you touch anyone's genitals, they have a response. Then the response is to engorge with blood. If you manage to keep a man's penis rigid enough just to begin penetration, it becomes harder and harder as it goes, even if he's unconscious. So that's probably what the Q-tip was for, was just to achieve that initial penetration. And then, of course, the process of being ridden by this woman with a Q-tip in his penis necessarily shredded the inside of his bladder and his urethra, which was one method, which actually in my mind is possibly the most horrific rape case that I've heard of in the West. Was that the case of that guy and how he ended up being raped? I'm not talking about broken bottles or gang rape in a military like war rape, but that literally was the most skin crawling description of rape in the West that I've heard. So that's one method. Other methods are, for example, James Landreth was threatened with being charged with rape himself by the pregnant woman who accosted him. Essentially what happened is I believe they shared a hotel room and he slept on the couch, and then she helped herself to him during the night. And when he woke up to find her riding him, she said, if you say anything to anyone, I'll tell your commanders, because he was military at the time, that you actually raped me. And so he was basically, and also she said, if you do anything, you might hurt the baby. So he was extorted into the situation, into compliance. And interestingly enough, if you look at the statistics for the sexual abuse of servicemen, the largest proportion the largest number of their victimizers of servicemen is actually women. And I believe the largest proportion of the women that victimize them are civilians. And one of the way that these civilian women manage to victimize servicemen is because of the absolutely strict rules about fraternization, adultery, extramarital sex, promiscuity that they have to abide by as servicemen.
Yeah. Well, we all know that women use the system, the criminal system, as a weapon against men that they're unhappy with. I mean, we saw that all with we all saw that with the Gregory Allen Elliott case, where women essentially used the system itself, the anti-harassment system, the laws against criminal harassment, in order to harass an innocent man. So essentially, I think that women have this trump card that men just simply do not. No man is going to be able to threaten a woman, have sex with me or I'm going to accuse you of rape. And then your life will be ruined. Like, no, have sex with me or I'm going to accuse you of rape and I'll be a laughing stock. And everybody will treat me like a social pariah because, that's just the way the system works. The system does not work that way for men. And this is, I think, I think that women are probably a little bit more likely just inherently to make false accusations than men are in terms of interpersonal violence, rape, sexual abuse of children, domestic violence, things like that. I think that even if the law and the way it was applied was completely equal, I think you would still see a slight majority of false accusations of those things being made by women. But I do think that the reason why 80% or more of false accusations of interpersonal violence are made by women against men is because that's the way the system is set up to work, is to facilitate accusations that are made by women against men and not the other way around. It's a weapon that men don't have at their disposal.
All right, so Sean is back again. I'm try and take advantage of him for as long as we got him. Sean, do you have audio? I mean, when I say take advantage of you, I mean ask you questions. I think you've had enough of... Never mind. Sean, are you there? Or are you there? Hello?
You gotta unmute, Sean.
You gotta unmute if you're talking. I don't know if you know that. You're muted right now. And he's gone. All right, never mind.
Oh, God damn it.
We can't... I mean, look, I have a lot more questions for him. But we can't go a whole lot longer because we got to wrap the show up pretty soon. So I don't know what else to do. I think that... Go ahead, Allison.
The best call is just to interview him offline and then upload something, I think.
Yeah.
Just because, like he was saying, it's just his internet access at the group home he's at isn't sufficient for this. But if we can, we're pretty. You know what? I think you're right. We could go for another couple episodes with just this topic, and explore every aspect of it. Because there's
fuck the chat. Fuck.
Yeah, fuck you, chat. You're fucking cancer. But there's even this post on Kotaku in Action about media celebrating a woman's activist who was imprisoned 25 years for taking part in torturing a man before murdering him. And she describes it, this guy who interviewed her, she says, "I couldn't believe this girl was so intelligent and nice looking, could be so unemotional about what she was telling me and her friends had done. They'd squeezed the victim's testicles with a pair of pliers, beat him, burned him."
Well, Sean is back again.
There's more. Apparently after, when they questioned her about shoving a 3-foot metal bar,
That was her accomplice. That was a woman named Rita. But
we mentioned it on the show earlier. We talked about
did?
that.
Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Sean is back.
Sean is back. Sean, do you have audio? Sean, we're gonna lose him. Sean, if we're gonna have to call the show. I know that you're having trouble with the internet. Maybe we can try this again. If you can arrange something else. I despite the problems, I want you to know that I really do appreciate you coming on very strongly. I want to ask you some questions about what you might know about this woman, like maybe how she grew up, what her experiences were, because it seems like she has a lot of problems. Sean is double back. Sean?
Yeah, no, there's two of them.
Sean, are you there? Sean?
He's everywhere and nowhere.
I think he's multiplying.
He's multiplying, but he's not saying anything. So it's multiple mute people.
I think your best bet is an off-air interview.
Yeah, we'll have to do something else. I'm sorry that we couldn't get something more consistent.
A recorded interview, but not non-broadcast.
Yeah,
so,
it'd have to be done another way. So, Sean, if you're listening, if you can hear this, we'll set something up. I can ask you more about your experiences. I think that stories like yours need to be heard by everyone. Oh, there you are, but you can't hear anything. So I don't know what to tell you. But I think that what we're going to have to do is we're just going to have to wrap it up. And I feel bad about it because I wanted to talk to Sean and get really into his story. But I think, this wasn't a complete wash because we did get a lot of other discussion around male victims of rape done and also abuse. So I think that Sean's story would be great. We just need to work out the internet problems on his end, and then we can do it. So I guess, does anybody else want to take us out or what? Because I don't think we can go much further.
There's lots of people that want to take us out.
Right, I think there's a line.
No, take me out. That's Franz Ferdinand.
I know,
Yeah.
that's a good song.
It
See, Bunny gets me.
Form a queue. No, Franz Ferdinand? Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. So I've been saving up all my points
Oh,
throughout the whole
yeah.
thing.
Bunny.
'Cause I'm like,
I want Bunny to, yeah, let Bunny talk.
Bunny's
Everyone.
in forensics. Let's hear Bunny.
Okay. The first thing, to your point, Karen, about mandated reporting in ERs, the training now, and this is as of this year, and this is just with forensics, the training right now is actually to back really far off and not force police involvement in cases of domestic violence that only involve adults, because there's so much evidence that it can actually make things worse. So what happens is, if they're together, you will separate them and try and when you get who you believe the victim is, you say, okay, so now that they're gone, are you okay? Because I don't think you're telling me the truth. And give them all the resources they need. Do you want to call the police? So that is currently the training that has come my way for ER forensics type things and in nursing.
I'm actually happy with that, because just simply because so much of the proportion of domestic violence cases fall into that sort of common couple violence category.
Oh my fucking god!
That
Is
doesn't.
getting that bizarre sound when Karen talks?
Oh my god! Shh.
I don't
You
know.
like-
I don't get I don't get that sound, so the listeners aren't going to get that sound either, whatever that sound is.
Yay.
Oh, maybe it's just her voice. Never mind.
Whatever. I feel that because so many cases of domestic violence, so a large proportion, half or a small majority of the cases are not cases that are going to they're not going to escalate. They tend to de-escalate over time. They tend to like a public health approach is really and not a criminal approach, because the criminal right now is not about just charging somebody with assault. It's about breaking up the family and completely annihilating the relationship and then putting the man through this kind of bizarre rehabilitation based on patriarchy theory, and putting the woman into a shelter where she's going to be indoctrinated into this kind of mindset that all men hate her.
And that's my asterisk. That's my asterisk that I was going to put under that. Now, with that said, in the case of what you would consider a vulnerable population, so children, or if you have a physical disability or a serious mental disability, or you're elderly, then obviously there's mandated reporting with that, because you're considered a vulnerable population. And it is at the discretion of the individual HCP. So if you get a nurse or a doctor who has a real hard-on for this stuff, then they're going to make an executive decision. But I will just say that the training now is moving away from that kind of criminal involvement, except in the case of what is considered the vulnerable populations. Because there's been as I said, there's so much evidence that sometimes messing with it makes it so much worse. So yeah, so that is good. So that is my first point. My second point, how do women accomplish these things? So when I was studying female rapists, and again, adult to adult, it was they were asleep, or they were drunk, or they were tied up, or they were held down because the woman in question was significantly heftier. So in terms of leverage and weight. So those were the big four that I noticed when I was studying that. So how can women accomplish this? Pretty easily if they really want to. So yeah. And the last thing I wanted to say with respect to the chat going, why are you spending so much time on this? Because there are still places like India where the gender-neutral rape laws are actively opposed. That is why we're talking about this. Because there is still the attitude that men cannot be assaulted. Men cannot be raped by women. Well, and the India example it stood out in my head so starkly, because there are men who are actively saying, we don't want preferential treatment. Just put us on the fucking books, would you? Please?
Well, what gets me about India is that essentially the way the rape laws are written right now, if a grown woman has an extramarital affair with her 13-year-old male neighbor, he can be charged with rape, but she can't.
Well, and India currently has, at least according to, I believe the publication is called The Hindu, there's actually a 65 to 85% false rate among accusations because of India's culture. There are numerous accusations that are made by parents who do not like the fact that their daughter eloped with a guy they disapprove of. There are accusations by women who are making these accusations due to breach of promise to marry, whether there was a promise to marry or not. So there are situations where, and then there are situations where the woman refuses to cooperate or backs out of the accusation after she's made it, which is why there's this discrepancy in the high and the low end of these. It's the 65% is accusations that are confirmed to be false accusations of rape because of parents making accusations to stop an elopement, or women making accusations because of a breach of promise to marry. That just encompasses those two types of things. And by the way, it's not just India where feminists have opposed equal treatment for male victims. Israel, feminists in Israel stopped legislation to recognize that it is rape when a man is forced by a woman.
Well,
And they both sets of feminists used the same excuse. They claimed that it would lead to false accusations.
Yeah.
So they don't believe that accusations can be false when the accuser is female, but they assume that accusations will be false when the accuser is male.
Yeah, no, this is false accusations matter now that only matter when men can make them, right? It's absolutely obscene. And when you actually look at not just the legislation, which is, again, like I said, largely gender neutral in the West, when you actually look at the policy documents and the training materials and all of those things, those are anything but gender neutral. When you look at the attitudes of judges and juries, those are anything but gender neutral. And so essentially what you have is a law that on paper looks gender equal, but in reality, in practice, it's absolutely skewed towards the idea that mainly almost all victims are female, and the vast, like I hear this from feminists all the time, 95% of rape victims are female and 98% of rapists are male, right? That is the common retort when it comes to trying to draw attention to male victims of rape. They say, well, but there's such a small minority. 95% of victims are female, 98% of perpetrators are male, right? Now, that's not coming from the letter of the law. That's coming from the training materials and the educational stuff that's being put out, and the Don't Be That Guy posters and all of those things, right? And it completely erases, sort of the associated crimes that come along with rape laws, which are false reporting, which are women who regret sex and then decide that they're going to report a man, or they're mad at him and they decide they're going to report him for rape, right? And all of those things are women using rape laws in order to essentially rape a man. And none of our governments are prepared to actually take an honest, objective look at the liabilities, the actual objective liabilities of two people who decide to have sex. Both of them are lying, right? Both of them are saying, oh yeah, no, I'm using protection, right? Who has lifelong consequences and who doesn't?
Well, the other thing is the issue of honest statistics on female perpetration is sort of there's a cycle that perpetuates this issue, because you have, well, we don't need to study this because it's rare. It's perceived as rare because there's not a lot of information on it that's acknowledged. That information isn't acknowledged because the definitions that are accepted for the crime exclude female perpetrators. And those definitions exclude female perpetrators because it's assumed that we don't need to worry about them because it's rare. So then it's perceived as rare because there's not a lot of information And it just keeps going in that vicious circle. Well, we don't know about this because we don't look into it. We don't look into it because we think it's rare. We think it's rare because there's not a lot of information. There's not a lot of information because we don't look into it because we think it's rare. And you just keep doing that. You never find out.
That was the excuse of the Ontario government when they were asked why they weren't screening all patients, because they were started screening all women and girls for possible domestic violence. So family doctors were required to essentially, they didn't necessarily have to ask questions about it, but they had to actually, when they did their examination, make observations. Does this person have bruises, whatever, right? And then ask follow-up questions if they deemed it fitting, deemed it necessary. When they were asked why they didn't expand this to men and in particular boys, right? They said, well, we just don't have any information on it. Like, I mean, it's rare. It's not supported by the data that we have. Well, the data that you have
was designed specifically to exclude that information.
That is fucking bullshit. They've known since the 70s and the 80s that men are a significant portion of domestic violence and sexual abuse victims. But at the risk, because I got to stop this, because I know that the two of you can spiral this into like a 6-hour stream. This can't become the endless stream because I said that I would kill it.
It can.
You can't. All right. I just want to
absolutely can.
This is your first Pussycat stream. I just want to point something out to you. It is completely unfucking civilized because there is no way to tame pussy. And have you mentioned Patreon reward, which is we are going to talk about the Juggalo march against Trump, alleged march against Trump. The Juggalos are on the march and they hate Trump, supposedly.
I don't think that it's specifically about Trump, actually. What's going on with them is that...
That's the after show.
But that's not about Trump. It's about the FBI.
Hannah, after show. www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. The pussy cannot be contained, Brian.